Hello to all the Pewter people, and also to the cheeseheads that may have found their way to this video. This is Adam Slivon, and joined with me is Packers ESPN reporter Rob Demovsky. Rob and I are going to look at some key storylines ahead of this week's matchup and how each team can emerge victorious. Rob, it's a pleasure to have you on. How are you doing?
Good, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So, just kind of want to get right into it. So, when you look at the Packers and the Bucs for this week's matchup, a lot of things have changed since they last played last season. Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, they're no longer with either team. And with that has come an identity shift, and each team has had to find different ways to win.
Yep.
So the Packers' new quarterback, it isn't Brett Favre, it isn't Aaron Rodgers, it's Jordan Love. And when you look at Love this season, he's had times where he's looked really good and other times when he's looked like a young quarterback.
Yep.
Rob, I want to ask you, how would you assess his play this season with a group of young wide receivers and also his leadership carrying that young team forward?
Yeah, that's the thing I think, Adam, that's really important to point out is that, they didn't just take the same team they had last year and swap quarterbacks. They pretty much revamped, their receiving core, their tight end group. So it's sort of been, not just Jordan Love trying to figure this out, but an entire young offense trying to figure it out. I mean, they're the only team in the league that doesn't have a catch by a receiver in his third or more seasons in the NFL because they don't have a receiver in his third or more seasons. I mean, it's all first and second year guys. You compound that with the fact that, Christian Watson, arguably their biggest deep threat, big play receiver, has missed a ton of games with the hamstring injury. Running back Aaron Jones hasn't been right since he got hurt in the opener. He's been in and out of the lineup. There's a chance he could be back this week. But, I mean, all that considered, I think you have to look at what Jordan Love's done and say, he's battled through it pretty well. It was a rocky stretch there when they had, were on that losing streak and he was throwing interceptions. Then he went on a really, really hot streak. Yeah. Little bit of a stumble, Monday night at the Giants. But, even at the end of that game, Adam, he recovered and led them to a go-ahead touchdown drive. So even though he didn't, probably didn't play the way he had been playing the previous month or so, he still probably come out of it feeling okay about him because of the way he, led that last drive. And I mean, they went ahead. I mean, he gave him, they gave him the lead. Defense couldn't hold it, which has sort of been a little bit of the story around here for a while. But I think all in all, I don't know that they can sit here and say that they have their next MVP quarterback, but yeah. I think we can sit here and say they've got a guy that's, going to be here for a little while and let's see where it goes. They certainly have to feel good enough about him to, not have to draft in the first or second round next year.
And that's huge because so many teams, they spend such a long time looking for that guy. When you look at even like the Bears, they haven't really found that guy since they've been an organization. And then when you look at the Packers, it's like the past 30 years they've had really good quarterback play. So it may be a dip from Aaron Rodgers, really anybody would be, but it sounds like Jordan Love he's kind of took the reins and he's had some success.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the idea was that they were going to start young and let those guys grow together to build something for the future, which is why, I think anything that they do this year in terms of, postseason or even being close to the postseason, it's almost like a bonus because this whole year was built around one thing, is determining whether Jordan Love is the guy. And then if he is, where you need to build around him. And if he's not, how you go about finding the guy. And I think they know enough now that they can build around him and see where that goes. So, if they make the playoffs this year, I mean, I don't want to say it's a bonus because everybody, is trying to get there, but it kind of is. It would kind of be a bonus if they get into the postseason. I mean, Adam, keep in mind, if they do make the playoffs, Jordan Love will have done something that neither Favre nor Rodgers did. Neither one of them made the playoffs in their first year as a starter.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, Rodgers only had 6 wins as a rookie back in or first year in 2008.
Yep.
And so for the Bucs and the Packers, both teams are a little bit banged up. The injury report yesterday showed on both sides of the ball for the Packers, you have Jair Alexander, Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon, the running backs, and then that extends to the wide receivers too. A guy like Christian Watson, he struggled to stay healthy in his career so far. And then also Jaden Reed was limited, and Dontavian Wicks didn't
Yeah.
participate.
Yeah.
And then on the Bucs side of the ball, the defense, Vita Vea, he didn't participate, nor did Carlton Davis, and Jamel Dean was limited. So on both sides of the ball,
And
both
Devin
teams are
White
banged
too,
up.
right? Wasn't Devin White out as well?
Yeah, Devin White was
Yeah.
also he didn't participate.
Yeah.
So when you look at it and all those players, whose status maybe changes the outcome the most in this game, if they play or if they don't play?
Yeah, I think when you look at the Packers, it's probably two guys. It's probably Watson, who I honestly don't think is going to play. He missed 3 games early in the year with a hamstring injury. If he came back this week, he would have only missed 1 game with basically the same injury. That seems a little unlikely. I think Aaron Jones can help them. He just has really not had a year at all where he's been able to stay on the field. He's got a knee injury. He's missed the last 3 games, I believe. So, I think those 2 guys, would be big additions if they got them. Now they've played so much without them that, I don't know that it affects them that much. And then, you mentioned the receivers. I mean, they got 3 of their top 4 receivers on this injury list with Watson, Reed, and Wicks. I think you look at Tampa. I mean, you talk about a couple guys, a couple names there. Vita Vea and Devin White. I mean, those guys have been big impact players against the Packers before. I mean, these teams have played a bunch, right? Going back to the playoff, the NFC Championship game a few years ago. They played down there as well. If I'm not mistaken, Jamel Dean picked off Rodgers at least once in a game there. I think that was the COVID year. So I think any one of those defensive guys or combination of those defensive guys, their status for this game certainly affects the Packers in terms of what they can do against them. Now, I've seen the numbers. I know the Bucs passing defense isn't very good, right? I mean, they're near the bottom.
Yeah.
So, maybe you can say even if they have those guys, it's not that big of a factor. But I just think you look at those 2 groups, for each side, and those are big game changers depending on who plays.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the Bucs pass rush. So this season in the sack department, they've been able to put up some respectable numbers. But in terms of pressures, last week against the Falcons, they didn't really generate a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And the Packers offensive line, all things considered, they've been playing pretty solid. Zach Tom, he looks like a tackle of the future, maybe replacing Bakhtiari. And it'll be big for guys. If Vita Vea doesn't play, the rookie Kalijah Cansey, he's had a really nice season in his first year in Tampa Bay. And then Shaq Barrett and Yaya Diaby will also need to be able to generate some pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right about the Packers offensive line. I mean, they've actually held up in pass protection pretty well. Surprisingly, maybe considering Bakhtiari only played in the season opener and hasn't played since. They're doing this weird rotation where Rasheed Walker and Yash Nyman have rotated series at left tackle, which you don't normally see that in game, right? Like Yash Nyman hasn't gotten as much, but he's gotten 2 or 3 series within games. And then they've also done it at right guard where they've thrown Sean Ryan, a second-year guy, in there, for a series or 2 in the middle of a game where John Runyon Jr. would normally play. So it's been a little bit of a weird year on the offensive line, but they've actually held up pretty well in pass protection. Run blocking has probably not been as good, which is when you're going to be shuffling guys on the offensive line and you're losing an all-pro guy in Bakhtiari, it's got to show up somewhere. And it looks to me like it's shown up more in the run game than the pass game.
Gotcha. So when you look at the identity of the Packers, you mentioned like the run game and the pass game. The run game really hasn't had a ton of success this year. With Aaron Jones being injured, he's averaging, I think, 3.7 yards a carry. AJ Dillon, 3.5. The Bucs, it's a similar story. But when you look at the Packers, what would you say their true identity is? Is it in the pass game? Is it relying on these young weapons?
Yeah.
And with the defense, a guy like Quay Walker, he did not participate yesterday. He was out the last game. the leading tackler. You have Jair Alexander, the top corner. What is the identity of this Packers team? They've beat some really good teams like the
Yeah.
Chiefs and Lions, but then they've also lost games against the Raiders and the Giants.
Yeah, I think from an offensive standpoint, it's just the youth and the good and the bad that come with it. I mean, they've got some talented guys, they've got some athleticism, maybe a little bit more speed than they've had in the past. But there's been inconsistencies and mistakes. I think the one thing when you look at the Packers offense that you'll notice is they do a lot of motion, a lot of pre-snap motion. Jaden Reed is involved in it a lot. Christian Watson.
He's looked really good this year.
Yeah, Jaden Reed's looked really, really good. Now they went to the well on they've run him a lot, and they've went to the end around or reverse plays a lot, and they went to the well a couple too many times against the Giants, and they got stuffed, especially on the 2-point conversion, which might have sort of changed the complexity of the end of that game. But you'll see a lot of guys going in motion. You'll see a lot of movement. And I think that's kind of what the Packers have done best. And the play action game. I mean, Jordan Love has been really good in play action, which is kind of strange, Adam, because they don't run the ball very well. So why would you bite on play action? But yet it still seems to work for them. And on defense, it's simple. They cannot stop the run. I mean, that's the identity of this defense. It seems
even
like
with a guy like Kenny Clark, who in the past he's been so good.
You mentioned Quay Walker. You mentioned, like some of these defensive guys. They have talent there. And it just has not translated into run defense. And that's nothing new around here. They've been bad against the run for years and years. And it's not just defensive coordinator Joe Barry. It was bad under Mike Pettin. At times it was bad under Dom Capers. For whatever reason, they just have never been able to field a consistent run-stopping unit. And, they have allowed 4 teams this year to rush for 200 yards or more, 4 times out of 13 games. I mean, you cannot do that and expect to be able to win on a consistent basis.
No, and with that, an interesting variable is the Bucs running game has started to get going in recent weeks. Rashad White, he's ran for over 100 yards in 2 of the past 3 games. And after being like the worst running attack in the NFL, they've started to have success. And it sounds like going up against the Packers, that's going to be key. If the Packers can stop the run, because if not, Rashad White can have a huge game.
Right. If I were game planning against this defense, I would do everything I could to exploit their run defensive issues.
So last question I have for you is when you look at this game, the Packers and the Bucs, it's a winnable game for each team.
Yeah.
The Packers and the Bucs last year had 8-9 records. They come into Week 15 here, identical 6-7 records. What do you think will be key for the Packers winning this game? They're 16-0 under Matt LaFleur at Lambeau Field. I know a lot's been made of that. Do the Packers really just have that home field advantage? And do you see that being the main reason why they'll win? Or
I don't know if that's the main reason. Honestly, this year it hasn't felt like they've had, the biggest home field advantage. I mean, the Lions game, there was a ton of blue in that stands. Even the Chiefs game, I know they won the game, but there were a ton of Chiefs. There was a lot of red in the stands. I don't expect Tampa to necessarily have that sort of help here. I mean, the old days, the Packers would go down to Tampa and there'd be just as many, if not more, Packers fans down there. And it was a huge advantage for them down there. Look, Baker Mayfield, I realize he's coming here with a different team, but he has come here the last 2 years. In 2021 with Cleveland, it was late in the season. I think it was around Christmas time, and he threw 4 interceptions. Last year, he came in here in Week 15, late in the season again with the Rams, threw an interception. I mean, it was last 2 games at Lambeau in late season games. He's thrown 5 combined interceptions, and I mean, if he's going to throw, if he's going to turn the ball over, I think that that's going to be really hard to overcome for Tampa. Now, the Packers don't have necessarily the ball hawking defense that they've had in the past. I mean, their best interception guy last couple of years was Rasul Douglas, and they traded him to the Bills at the trade deadline. And you mentioned Jair Alexander. He's missed like 5 games in a row with a shoulder injury that no one seems to figure out why, if it was going to be out this long, why they didn't put him on injured reserve. Something strange is going on there. Who knows if he'll play. But I think that, I think Baker Mayfield and how he takes care of the football or doesn't take care of the football will be a big factor in this game.
And I think for Baker Mayfield, he's looked better than he did last season with the Panthers and the Rams, but a lot of similarities to his Browns tenure. You mentioned the interceptions. the last 5 games, he started to throw more interceptions, and the inefficiencies with the football as well. Not completing even 50% of his passes last week, and I think the prior week as well. So he's kind of looked like the Browns guy, where
Yeah.
he shows moments and he's gritty enough to win the team some football games, but there's still that
Yeah.
inconsistency there.
Yeah, you look at, I mean, you mentioned how identical these teams are in terms of where they were last year, where they're at this year. I mean, that tells us one thing, that these teams are flawed and incomplete, right? I mean, there's going to be issues. You're 6-7 for a reason. You're good enough to win some games, but you're not good enough to do it on a consistent basis, which tells you that you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to give opportunities to the other team. So I think it could come down to who makes the fewest mistakes this week. I'm real curious to see how the Packers bounce back from a game where they've been on a nice winning streak, and they go out to New York playing a bad team, and kind of laid an egg a little bit out there, and it'll be and they're coming off a short week off of a Monday night game. It'll be really interesting to see if they respond in a way that hey, that was bad, that was embarrassing, we can't play like that, or if it impacts them and there's a hangover effect from it. I think that's, from the Packers standpoint, I think that's going to be a huge thing, an interesting thing to watch as they start to play this game, and how the game goes on. If it doesn't go well at the beginning, can they rally from it, or whatever the case may be, how that Giants loss impacts this game, I think will be very interesting. And to be honest with you, Adam, I'm not sure I can predict how they're going to come out of it. It could go either way.
Yeah. Yeah, and it all comes down to momentum too. And for the Packers, they had that momentum
Good.
before they got to New York, and then that loss, it kind of puts them
Mm-hmm.
back to square one. And this game's going to be critical. You mentioned the opportunities and being able to capitalize on them, and then also who's going to be available. The best
Yeah,
ability is availability, they say.
that's right.
And a lot of these players, their statuses are up in the air. I think from a Bucs perspective, that's going to be the biggest thing, is if they can capitalize on that, and also, again, getting the running game going. And if that's for real in the frozen tundra, it might be a battle on the ground. And I don't know if that's a battle the Packers can win, or if they'll be able to rely on Jordan Love to make those plays. But lastly, I want to get your prediction for the game, the score wise. Do you think the Packers are going to come out with a win, or do you see the away team coming all the way up to the frozen tundra and getting a win?
I've been terrible at predicting games this year. I mean, just terrible. Like, I think I got them right in Chicago week 1. And then there was that stretch where they played at the Raiders and at the Broncos, who I did not think were very good teams. And I picked the
Yeah.
Packers, and they got beat in those games. And then you have, at Thanksgiving, or at Detroit on Thanksgiving, I picked the Lions to win and was wrong about that. And the Chiefs coming in here. So take it for what it's worth, which is probably not much. I do suspect that Matt LaFleur will have this team, much more, ready to go, much more prepared for this game, especially considering what happened last week. If I had to pick a score, I would say it's something in the 24-21 range. Obviously a game like that, if it's that close, could go either way. But at this point, I would say I'm leaning toward the Packers in a close 3-point type of game.
It's funny you say that, because 24-21, my mind, I was thinking 23-20 Packers. I think
Yep.
with that home field advantage here in the Go Pack Go, it's going to be cold for Tampa Bay as well, because they're not used to playing in the cold. It's not going to be as cold as it.
Yeah, it's really not. I think it's going to be in the high 30s or something like that. So it's not too bad, and it's a noon game, so you should get the warmest part of the day. So actually, I see the high is 42 for Sunday. So
Man, for mid-December, you'll take that.
I won't even be wearing a coat. It's so nice.
Yeah. But Rob, I have your social media scrolling across the bottom. Rob Demovsky on X. Rob, I really appreciate your time kind of going over this game with me, and we'll see what happens Sunday.
Yeah, you got it, Adam. Look forward to seeing you.